Sound speeds, and welcome back to the Speed Bumps podcast, the podcast that takes place during my drive home from set. It is starting to get hot here in the northern hemisphere, isn't it? I don't like it. I want to go back to when it was nice and cool. Now, real quick here, I am still shooting this episode with the camera, which is the Insta360 X3. If there's something that happens on the road that you guys need to see, the camera will fling around and look at that, but if not, it will remain on me the entire show. We'll see what happens. I'm still recording with the Shure Twinplex TL47 lavalier microphone going into the DD BP-TRX as a recorder, and it's suiting my purposes just fine. I have really no reason to upgrade, even though I do know there's other things on the market that do have 32-bit floating point. Do I really want to have to go there? Let's not. Watch my video on 32-bit floating point if you want to know my thoughts on whether or not it needs to be used for everything. But let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into the content. For the first topic in this video, I thought I would discuss extending your wireless range when doing plant mics and you cannot get on the cart itself. Sometimes they'll say, drop the bag on there, let's keep the bag with the car, and then we'll just free drive it all over the place. But if that's not an option, because let's say a car is driving up, it's involved in a stunt, cameras are on the outside of the car, and you still might start with the long lens with actors looking way down the way, and you need that extended range, what are you going to do? Now, the obvious choice may be to put lavalier microphones and transmitters and everything up here in the visor, get it as high as possible, run with it that way. But there's a couple other options you might want to familiarize yourself with. Number one is a magnetic mount for the car. And if you use a small plant microphone, for example, something that actually has a transmitter with a removable antenna, for example, and you wanted to remove the antenna that's on that transmitter, unscrew it, then screw it onto a magnetic mount. There's a length of cable that comes from that mount that you would screw into the transmitter, and then you screw your antenna into the part that is magnetized. The reason I'm suggesting using that as a very good option first is because it's usually very low profile, it fits into a very small area, and it can even fit on top of your car and magnetize to your roof. So I have a sunroof on this car, but if I didn't, I could run it very easily outside of the window here in this little groove right here, which you can see because I have a 360 camera. I can put it through here and route it to the outside and snug it right underneath here where it's going to be hidden and you're not going to see it. I can push this up, jam it through there, and it would extend outside. Now, granted, you do want to be careful as you're running it through a door, but it's got to close anyway, right? When you put this magnetic mount on top of the car, it may be something that is visible if it's in a place that's going to be picked up by camera. I'm driving a sedan right now, and if I put it in the back, right on top in the center, behind the window or something like that, if the car is driving away from camera, the antenna would be closer. Something like that, it may be small enough to not be visible. If you are driving away from camera and you want to make sure it's not visible and the cameras are low, like a lot of them are when you're doing car work, unless you're using a crane or something like that, maybe it's far enough away and you'll never see it. It won't play, or won't read rather, on camera. So in that case, then you might want to put it right in the center at the top and see if it can be masked or hidden. Maybe even if you're going fast enough speed, it's a big budget show, you might ask if they do see it, if they might be able to smudge it out or something like that with VFX. Sometimes that is an option, and it's one that you might want to mention to the script supervisor and even the DP if you are clear to do that. So that way they have notes of it. Now, if you don't have a magnetic mount, and by the way, I will put a link down in the description to the one that I use. There is the Maggie mount, which I think is about $75 or $80 as of the time of this video, or at least it was the last time I priced it out a few years ago. But also, I do know that there are other companies that make magnetic mounts that you can stick on your car that are just as effective, even though they might not be nearly as low profile as the Maggie mount. But if you don't mind something that's maybe not quite as like a little tiny little bitty magnet that's high strength, you might want to have something that's maybe a little bit bigger, a slightly bigger footprint, something like that. You can easily get another option like on Amazon. They do sell those. I have personally bought a couple of them, never had a failure from any of them. You just have to make sure that the antenna from the transmitter is taken off and put on the magnet end, and then the other side is secured onto your the transmitter itself. That basically extends the antenna range. And then if you run it and stick it on top of some place where it's line of sight to your receiving antennas, it should be great. The second option is actually a door a window version. You'd roll down your window a little bit, you stick it inside of your door, and then raise it up, and it sticks the antenna outside a little bit away from the car. If you cannot get a magnet on top of the car because let's just say cameras are over here and they're looking this direction and you can't put it on the front or back, you can maybe put it on the side window by rolling down the window, putting it on there, and then rolling the window back up. Same exact thing. You take your antenna off the transmitter, you screw it onto the window part, and then you run the cable to where it's going to go and put it inside the transmitter. That gets it at least in even with the window, and the antenna will stick up over the top of the car. Those two options will help you to extend your range if you are doing any kind of location car work and you cannot put your bag inside, or you can't ride with the car for some sort of reason. Many times you'll do an insert car or a process trailer, and in that case the sound mixer will be up on the insert car, and you'll basically have the trailer pulling the car with the sound mixer and everybody in tow. That will be one thing. But if you can't because the car's free driving and the mixer doesn't want to throw the bag in there, let's just say they're driving up, they're saying stuff in the car, and you need to have your car plants there, and then maybe the car starts off in close on camera. They say some stuff and then they take off running, and you hear the person yelling and screaming in the car while the other person's laughing hysterically. In that kind of a circumstance, you want to make sure you catch all that from the car because it's a lot of fun and they may end up using it. Maybe they also might have a camera on the inside of the car and say, well, let's also put cameras on the outside too. And in that case, you need to definitely make sure you get the dialogue on the inside of the car, preferably with your plant microphones, while having the range. And you can easily hide that in a window, hide it on top of the roof as needed, depending on what the shots entail. So those are a couple of options if you need to extend your wireless antenna range when you're doing car plants for a movie or television show. For the second topic in this video, I thought we would discuss why I'm not a huge advocate for production sound people using hand sanitizer overly much. Now, granted, I will use it on set to basically take sticky and stuff off of my hands. If I get a little something on there, I may use it for that purpose. But if I'm laving up someone and putting a wireless microphone on them, I'm not going to use them. Sure, the preferred method would be to wash your hands with soap and water. Alton Brown, during the shutdown of 2020, released a video at the beginning saying it didn't matter if it was hot or cold water. The main point is using an antibacterial soap and rubbing your hands together for 30 to 40 seconds. That's what he recommended. A lot of people will say use hot water, but Alton says cold or hot, it doesn't matter. It depends on the antibacterial soap and your usage of that, how you cover your hands and how you wash them. I'm not going to speak as to which one is right, which one is wrong, but what I will say is my personal preference when I'm on set is washing my hands. If I can't though, I will use hand sanitizing wipes as opposed to hand sanitizer. I'm a much bigger advocate for that because if you get your hands dirty and then use hand sanitizer, really all you're doing is rubbing around the dirt and making that sanitary. Here's an example for you. Let's say you're running a cable to connect a video for your sound mixer, and you end up running it through a field, and you later find out that someone kicked your cable and now it's laying in dog dew. Sure, you're going to want to clean that off and make sure that it is sanitary, probably with a Lysol wipe. But let's just say that you move that over and you don't have gloves on. That's bad, first of all. You should always wear gloves anytime you are on set and going to be messing with cables or moving something like that. But let's just say you don't have your gloves and you can't get anywhere close to washing your hands until after you wire talent, because let's say it's all a drive away. You'd have to jump on a van. And production is screaming at you to do that. You have to do something. Well, hand sanitizer is going to simply rub around the dirt and the grime and stuff. Sure, it'll be sanitary, but do you really want to have all that on your hands when you go to wire talent? I don't think you do. Instead, what I recommend is the hand sanitizing wipes. I almost said sand sanitizing wipes, but the hand sanitizing wipes, not the baby wet ones or something like that you just use when you're wiping down a baby after they go whatever. But instead, the kind that has antibacterial presence, chemicals or antibacterial, basically. It's 99.9% antibacterial usually. That's the one I prefer to use personally. It's still gentle enough on your skin. It will make your hands nice and clean feeling, and it might even have a little scent to it, even though most of the time it won't. The main point here that I'm making is that right there allows you to wipe off your hands and then you throw the wipe away. If there's dirt on it, grab another one, wipe your hands again, and you can wipe the stuff off. And the hand sanitizing presence of that, the 99.9% antibacterial, that will really help tremendously to sterilize your hands and get it clean. If you want to after that, use hand sanitizer if you'd like to. But for the most part, I don't like using hand sanitizer if there is a hand sanitizing wipe near me, because I would prefer to use it. Now, this is different than Lysol wipes. Lysol wipes, if you use over and over again over the course of a day, it's going to take the skin off your hands. You don't want to do that. You will use that on the cable to clean it after it's been in dog poo or something like that, and you run it through that or it's kicked into that. That's a different matter altogether. But for your hands, you would want to wear gloves for that, first of all, when you're cleaning the cable. But for your hands, you want to use something more delicate. If you can't wash your hands, hand sanitizing wipes is definitely a better option. You can usually get them at some place like the Dollar General, Big Lots, any grocery store, convenience store, something like that. But just look for the one that has antibacterial. It'll usually say 99.9% whatever the wording is that it says that. But it will actually protect against germs for, like, it says 99.9% or something like that. Don't get the Lysol wipes, get those. If it's a wet one or something that doesn't have any kind of a cleaning agent in that, and all it is doing is basically just wetting down the surface and taking a little bit off of it, that is not my preference either. I usually like, if you're going to wipe your hands down with something, there to be at least some sort of a sanitation process happening, even if it's not hand sanitizer and the rubbing alcohol built into that. There you go. So there you have it, another episode of the Speed Bumps Podcast in the can. If you have a question you'd like me to answer in a future episode of the Speed Bumps Podcast, please send me an email at alan@soundspeeds.us, and I would be very grateful. Please make sure you put in the subject that it is a question for the Speed Bumps Podcast. I am not normally a fan of people asking very long questions in the comments. Some people like to write big, long, huge lists of all kinds of things, giving me some situation when the answer is just use a different cable. Something like that. You'll write this entire novel and then I have to read it. Nor am I a big fan of a question that requires a very big, elaborate answer in the comments. And if I give a quick answer, the person's like, that wasn't helpful. You don't know what you're talking about. I don't want to do that. If you need to ask a question that requires additional information and submit something like that for the Speed Bumps Podcast, please send me an email. Write simple questions in the description. I'll be glad to answer those. I don't need to get into this anymore. It's just one of those things. Thank you for tuning in this episode of the Speed Bumps Podcast, and I'll see you in the next episode with more, as always, sound advice.
If you'd like to ask a sound-related question to be answered in a future episode, send text, audio, or video to ssp@soundspeeds.us. Want to record this outro? Details in the description below. Find us on social media and online at www.soundspeeds.us. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for more sound-related content.